chop and drop with the flail mower works pretty well. As you can see here in this bed that was overgrown, it was quite overgrown like this. And I took the flail mower to it to chop and drop it. Now I put the flail mower on the highest setting. By the way, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. I got a BCS tractor with a flail mowing attachment. You can see other videos in the description. But I put the flail mower at the highest settings, about 4 inches, to flail down the tall grass. I will go back and flail it at 1/4 inch after I'm finished doing the rest of the areas. But it's the end of the season and we're preparing for the fall cover crops. So everything gets flailed. It's the fastest and easiest way to clean these beds up, and it gives us our soil cover while adding biomass to the soil itself. So the flail mowing creates this nice powdery cover. Now it knocks a lot of stuff down too, because some of the materials in here is just too tall and some of it's gone to seed. I know on previous videos I said, look, you got to catch this stuff before it goes to seed. It's easier said than done, but I at least cut rows in where there was no hoses or anything like that. Those hoses need to come out. I crushed down areas that were overgrown and not productive. I created some wide beds, and I say this in almost every video. This is like the demonstration. This is like the perfect demonstration area right here. This is a level contour, and when I take the flail mower to it, when I take a tiller to it, whatever I take to it, it takes so well. And you can see I was able to cut that down quite nice. And this is also the demonstration area where I mulched by hand. And you get a similar effect when you flail mow, except flail mowing takes everything. Well, mulching by hand, you can go down a trail, cut specific materials. The reason I'm sharing all this with you is because the biomass turns this Virginia clay into a more usable soil. It almost doesn't matter what you have as biomass. And I'll show you here, down here, it's gonna get mowed with a big bush hog. So I opened up the stakes. I cut some paths where there's earthworks. But again, it doesn't matter what you use as biomass. You must have this biomass added to the soil. The best way to do it is to grow the material in place. You can see this newer field back here. It has all that material in place. This area right here had the sun hemp, and then it had wheat. Did we harvest all the wheat? No, we didn't. A lot of it was flailed. And then on the soil. Now again, this is like 4 days after I flail mowed at the highest setting. You can see some of the grass standing back up. So I come back later with a low setting, very low setting, and I can scald this. Now it's got a scald bar on it, so I won't actually get low enough to scald it all the way. But I can basically go through this material and I can cut every bit of grass down to about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. And then that mulch on the surface is going to choke out a lot of the regrowth. Now, could you rake this stuff up and use it as mulch in a garden area around plants? I guess so, but the flail mower chops everything down into little tiny pieces. And even if I sickle barred this, it is a combination of grasses, a combination of wheat, hairy vetch. It's a little bit of everything. Now, a little bit of everything's fine in place. We don't want to haul materials to other locations. But after you flail mow it, some of the stuff will stand back up, and then you come back and flail it at a lower setting. This field here, I had slung manure all over, so it's getting better. It was as hard as a rock before and was very difficult to till. So I hope this year it'll be a little bit better since we're adding the biomass. And again, we want to try to get the biomass before it goes to seed. Time and availability. I work a full-time job. Some of the other people who work here, they were working on a fence line, because the fence line, and this is a very important thing to look at. So the fence line protects animals which are more calorie per density. So the cow, the goats, the chickens actually have more calories per square foot. So they have a higher priority than your vegetables, because you can have a small square foot area growing vegetables in abundance. So all of this broadacre, and there's about 2 acres here, so all this broadacre, these beds in these bulk areas are not as valuable. You're not going to get as many calories from an ear of corn as you will from a chicken. Now, I know, a lot of people don't like to eat meat and they don't like to think about raising animals for meat. But again, that's how humans developed enough calories and the right nutrients in order to have the levels of intelligence that they have these days. And I was a raw foods vegan for 4 years. And I can tell you there were times where it was hard to get the volume of food necessary to get calories. And it caused mental, basically when you haven't eaten and you're lightheaded and you make dumb decisions. Very emotionally driven. So I worked with some folks and got the right calories and got the right nutrients and things were okay. But I can sit down with a steak and get the similar calorie count and a lot less effort put out. So remember, we're putting out effort to flail mow these fields. We're putting out effort to build soil. Are we going to get the returns that we're looking for? So sometimes this stuff is done rough. Sometimes things are allowed to overgrow because we're focusing on other activities. It's just something you have to understand and you have to manage on your own property. It is better to have a 12 by 12 garden, and we're working our way up here to the seed bed for nuts and for tree seeds. It's better to have a 12 by 12 garden that's managed very well than it is to, farm 40 acres. So you can see some of the trees coming along here. A lot of this is overgrown. Got some trees potted up in the nursery pots. But all this grass out here, it's biomass. Now, would it be easier to manage if we mowed it more frequently? And certainly yes. So a lot of times when you're growing out biomass, I say when it's waist high, you need to flail it. You need to either scythe it or flail it. Scything it gives you long cut grass that you can put on a smaller set of beds. Flailing it gives you small, tiny cuttings that preps a field for cover crop or preps a field for the next crop to be put in by plant start. So here's corn. Corn did okay, but it not what we expected. Again, an acre of corn isn't going to have as many calories as the animals you can grow on an acre. So investing in fence for your animals is more valuable than investing in, weeding a corn field. I'm going to get some corn out of here and it'll be fine. But overall, the soil is not where it needs to be. Now, as I'm observing the weeds that grow, these are indicators of what kinds of plants or what kind of soil we have. So on this side, we've got a lot of blackberries. That tells me the soil is a little more acidic and that the soil needs some more nutrient uptake. On the other side here, we have more grasses. That's good news. But we also have a lot of weeds that tell me that the soil is not as acidic as behind me, but it is not as good as we need it to be for a vegetable crop. So after this is flailed, I'll spread lime to kind of give me more grass. Grass loves lime because it makes the clay more readily. It makes the clay a little bit looser. It also helps the clay take up nutrients better. So the biomass plus the lime on clay soil tends to be better with grass. Now grass is a lot easier to flail mow or scythe. So grass is something easier to deal with rather than Jerusalem artichoke and there's some sun hemp over there and a lot of this other just weeds. Now up in this area we got a lot of grass, but the area that's been cultivated more, that's up near the top, was actually much cleaner. It was primarily hairy vetch. It was a lot easier to flail mow and overall easier to maintain. Now this looks just like a bush hogged field and we're okay with that, but over the years less and less of this deep stuff will grow because we're mulching and building up a layer of topsoil. And you can see in the paths there's a little plantain there, but mostly grass and clover. That's the ideal thing to grow in your beds. Grass, a little bit of grass and clover. Now you can see these rows with hairy vetch. That's excellent chop and drop. It flails very easily. And I was chop and drop and putting them around trees. But here's pretty good. See how this grass flailed out really well. Now again, I'm gonna come back with a lower setting and flail it down to nothing. That's why we want our beds level. Now, if you're gonna have permanent raised beds, that's a different factor. You gotta get in there by hand, but you're not gonna have 200-foot rows with beds that you gotta manage by hand. Unless you've got like a team of people out there working. You can see this is where all the wildflowers were up. Some people are gonna say, oh, Justin, you cut down the beautiful wildflowers and you destroyed all this habitat. The nice thing about flail mowing is that the rootstock is still underground. I'm not disturbing the soil. So this area where the wildflowers are, I would not do a shallow tillage to terminate the cover crop. And I may not even do a shallow tillage to terminate some of the stuff that's growing in here if we have nice level beds so that I can flail it super low. And then just basically it'll mulch kill itself. So we went from this to this. And then it's going to go even shorter. And we're going to end up with beds. We're actually going to get in here and level some more of these beds out just to make it easier to run on. So you're going to get something like this. And then we're going to flail it down even lower so that we get almost down to the soil. You can see the soil is much darker now this year than it's been in previous years. But the ground's also getting super soft. So it's getting harder and harder to bring that VCS tractor in here. And as I said in past videos, eventually we won't be able to use the tractor. We will be able to use it, but it won't be ideal because the soil will be soft and plants will grow better. And there won't be as many need for cover crops or this bulk growing because we will have worked out the seed bank. So again, if grass is about knee high, you want to be chopping and dropping, putting it around your preferred plants. If it's hip high, you want to flail it out or scythe it before it goes to seed so that you can get more like this the majority of the time. Because I will tell you, it's quite a bit of work to run that flail mower through here when you can't see the ground. So that's why we're gonna widen these terraces out. Gonna make these terraces much wider, more level. Still gonna have the same water capture functions. It's still gonna have that organic design that works with the slope of the hill. But ultimately, it'll allow us to bring in our appropriate equipment. It'll allow us to cut it more frequently, and it will reduce the number of vegetative strips because those vegetative strips, they're not getting cut clean. Anyway, I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. I hope you've learned something here that you can let it overgrow. It's just not ideal, but when you let it overgrow, you're increasing the amount of biomass. Now, if you're cutting it regularly, if you leave some beds idle and you cut that bed and then use that as mulch on a bed that's active, you're going to get the same amount of growth over time. It's just nothing's going to go to seed because you're going to keep cutting it before it goes to seed. So again, knee high, hip high, doesn't matter how tall you are. That's what we're looking for. If it's knee high, we cut it, chop and drop it around the vegetables. If it's hip high, we flail it or scythe it and use it as mulch, either in place or again around the vegetables we want to keep. The mulch becomes a protective layer. It basically kills out the plants underneath it. And then eventually you're going to get more and more patches of actually really high quality soil, and the weeds won't grow anymore. We're going to monitor the pH levels. We're going to monitor soil acidity, which goes with pH. And we're going to start getting that soil built up. A bunch of those tomatoes in there, all that stuff. Just chop it, drop it. You'll get volunteers later. Ideally, I would like to get goats in here or chickens in here, but that doesn't fit in the overall plan. And plus, they get predated by hawks, so we don't want to lose goats. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ask your questions below. I know this looks unusual, but this is how we get a massive amount of nutrients in place without any brought in fertilizer. with nothing but what's available on the farm. And then we're also conserving a lot of moisture. Even though there's sprinklers set up, the sprinklers get turned off very quickly. We're building soil health. See you in the next video.